changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration to make you simply happy. It's Thoughtful Thursday, and today I want to talk about an important story that we published. In fact, we published it twice. Once in Chicken Soup for the Soul Grandmothers, and then again in a special Mother's Day collection called Chicken Soup for the Soul for Mom with Love. This is a story about a terrible wrong and a family that needed to find closure and forgiveness. Jessie Mieko Santala starts her story, which is called Return to Heart Mountain, by telling us that she didn't know whether to throw up or be excited. She was driving 65 miles an hour towards something that really scared her. She and her husband Mike were in Wyoming, and it was beautiful, but she couldn't really appreciate it because of where they were going, the Heart Mountain relocation camp. They were going to visit the site of the internment camp where Jessie's grandmother had spent 3 years of her life, locked up like a prisoner during World War II because she was of Japanese descent. The construction of what was called the Heart Mountain Relocation Center had started in the summer of 1942, half a year after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It became the prison for 14,000 Americans of Japanese descent, who were brought in by train, mainly from the West Coast. Many of these people lost their businesses, their homes, their educational opportunities, and their lives, too, due to the hardships of the camp. Overall, well over 100,000 people of Japanese descent, 2/3 of them U.S. citizens, were rounded up and put in camps around the United States. This was ordered by President Franklin Roosevelt after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Jessie was there to come to grips with the story of one of those more than 100,000 people. As she and Mike drove down the gravel road to this awful place, Jessie's heart was pounding. It was a horrible place, but she needed to see it, to understand what her grandmother had lived through. They finally got there on a dirt road overgrown with weeds. 3 buildings loomed in front of them, surrounded by a barbed wire fence. This was where Jessie's grandmother was fenced in like cattle, Jessie thought. The buildings were dilapidated, but Jessie recognized them from the photos she had seen when she did her research. There were tiny windows, and in the walls she could see the black tar paper that barely kept out the wind and snow. In the distance, Jessie could see a tower made of bricks. She knew from her grandmother's stories that the tower used to be a part of the hospital for the prisoners. It was infamous in Jessie's family because that was where her grandmother's first daughter died when she was less than a day old. The reality of what happened to her grandmother hit Jessie hard as she stared at that fenced-in prison camp. She was angry, and she was crying. And then she remembered what she was doing there. She had come to take photos of a piece of her family's history. She grabbed her camera and ran closer to the buildings, taking photos. She took pictures for an hour, trying to get those buildings to tell her their stories. That was her way of trying to make peace with a past that had held her family captive for decades. Jessie was looking for some kind of closure. And then somehow it was over. Jessie whispered, "We forgive you." She picked up 2 small white rocks from the dirt to take home, one for her grandmother and one for herself. Booker T. Washington said, "I will permit no man to narrow and degrade my soul by making me hate him." And Jessie had found her own way to overcome the resentment and horror of what had happened in her own family back during World War II. I'm Amy Newmark. Thanks for listening to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast today. If you'd like to read this story, you can pick up a copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul Grandmothers or Chicken Soup for the Soul for Mom with Love. And to see what else we've got cooking for you at Chicken Soup for the Soul, please join the 2 million fans who follow Chicken Soup for the Soul on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. We post a lot of great quotes, stories, and videos. You can also visit our positive journalism website, aplus.com, to read stories about what is right with the world and to watch some excellent videos that will make you feel great about humanity in general despite the wrong steps that we often take.